Welcome to Prime Perspectives, where Keith Galicia guides you to the financial finish line. As a certified financial planner practitioner, he covers all topics in financial planning. Join him each episode to gain insights and strategies, helping you pursue your financial goals together.
Welcome, everyone, to the Prime Perspective podcast, where our goal is to get you to the finish line, whether it's anything from retirement planning, estate planning, tax planning, maybe a personal goal that you might have, which could include buying a home or even selling your business, which leads us to our special guest today. And his name is Scott Garrison. He is a CEPA, which is a Certified Exit Planning Advisor. He's going to give some of his perspective on the ins and outs of how business owners can have more potential for success in exiting their business. So, Scott, thanks for showing up today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Keith.
Absolutely. Well, let's just get into it. And can you tell me a little bit about your background and how you got into the exit planning industry?
Sure. I'll try to give you the short answer to that, but I'm a lifelong entrepreneur. Started my first company at the ripe age of 27. About 33 years ago. Had minority interests in 6 different businesses. I've exited 6 businesses. I think my motivation for getting into the industry is that I don't know that the process is refined and the education is what it should be. And a lot of business owners, including myself, have kind of walked into that scenario blindly. So it's motivated to come out and educate business owners on what oftentimes is their one and only exit.
Sounds good. So I think that really answers my question, but maybe you can add to that. Was there any light bulb that went off that inspired you to pursue a career as an exit planning advisor?
Yeah, sadly, it was a broken light bulb in our last exit. I was partners in a company called Stria, and a little over a year and a half ago, we sold to a company called Bitwise Industries. Actually, sold about 2.5 years ago, but it imploded about a year and a half ago, and lost our company, lost our jobs, and it was about as bad of a exit as you could possibly have. And I just decided, hey, it's time to turn my pain into my passion and my mess into my message.
Right. So you can either learn from it or wallow in it. And you chose to take the positive approach and take a lesson from this and see how can you evolve, which has been interesting. You've been able to evolve into a brand new career. You said 6 exits there, and now something that where you can take your life's work of experience along with the education of the CEPA program and provide that to the next business owners that are looking to exit. But the exit planning process has specific areas. So I'm a CEPA as well. I focus mainly on the wealth gap and the financial planning aspect for business owners. What specific areas of exit planning do you specialize in?
Well, the original plan, Keith, was to be the guy that helps write the exit plan, a succession plan, if you will, for the business owner, because I think a lot of people just kind of put that off. We get busy in our day to day and just never cross that bridge until we get to it, which unfortunately sometimes is too late. So my focus was to write a lot of exit plans, but as fate would have it, most of my clients that have me on a monthly retainer are basically looking for me to help them with strategic growth, get them over the hump. I was fortunate enough to be the VP of sales and marketing for 2 different companies that made the Inc. 5000 list 9 times as one of the fastest growing privately held companies in the United States. So I think I have more of a reputation for building companies, but I think it's a very good strategy to start with the end game in mind. Because like it or not, 100% of us business owners are going to exit one way or another. So it's good to have a plan.
Exactly. It's good to have a plan. And I think we'll get a little bit more into what exit planning is in a deeper dive into that. But
Sure.
So when when you think about exit planning, why is this important for business owners? Because most of us think, okay, I want to sell my business. It's been a great life for me. Somebody else might want this. It seems like I've been in it for 30, 40 years or so. It seems fine. But why, what is it about exit planning that is important for business owners?
Well, that's a pretty loaded question, Keith. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons. I think the greatest motivation is a lot of people don't even begin that process until one of the devastating 5Ds happens, right? So you have divorce, you have disagreement amongst partners, um, sometimes disability, distress that can come from a lawsuit or a pandemic or even death, right? And in that instance, if you don't have a plan in advance, you're going to either completely go out of business or it's going to wind up in litigation or you're going to have a fire sale and get pennies on the dollar. So having a plan in advance on what the succession looks like, whether it's going to be transferred internally to a family member that works in the business or to key employees or a third party sale, that plan needs to be in place long before one of the devastating Ds arises.
Yeah, it's kind of being able to exit your business on your terms, right? Not exiting by one of those 5Ds. And if you have to exit by one of those 5Ds, then you're prepared for a more probability of success in the type of exit that you want, as opposed to having to have a fire sale, discount your business, and probably not feel good about the transaction. I certainly get that.
Yeah,
Um,
that's accurate.
yeah. So can you explain the role of a certified exit planning advisor, how it differs from what I do, which is more on the financial planning, the wealth gap analysis, or even like a business broker, right? So all of those have three distinct roles, but what makes the SEPA advisor different than the other two?
Well, a true business exit is a team sport, right? So an exit planning advisor is just one of the professional advisors that typically would take part in that. And ideally, we all work in concert together. My role as an exit planner is I would, for years in advance of actually placing the business on the market, is I want to be able to work with that business owner, discuss the 7 or 8 different types of ways that you can exit a business, figure out what their goals and objectives are, and kind of decide what that plan looks like. And then as we get closer to a transaction date, then we can bring in some other advisors, including the CPAs and business law attorneys, financial advisors, tax specialists, because we want to coordinate that plan because it's the most significant transaction for most people is the one-time exit from their life's work.
Yeah, so most people try to attack maybe one lane at a time, right? Where it's like, hey, let me talk with my estate planning attorney, let me talk with my CPA, let me talk with my financial planner. And those can all be separate conversations, but if you can pull that team together to all kind of get everybody moving in one direction, then that seems that that's a better recipe for success. And so when a business owner starts thinking about that journey, when should they start thinking about exit plan? From
Yeah,
like,
I think a good time. I mean, if I would recommend at least a 3-year runway,
okay,
right? And if you're 3 to 10 years away from exiting, it's not too early to begin that conversation with someone like me. And it can be a relatively slow, methodical process, and we can bring in the other advisors when that time comes. But my hope is to develop a very trustworthy relationship with the business owner, be in a position where I'm not dependent on a success fee, right? Like your traditional business broker or M&A advisor, to where nobody gets paid until the deal goes through escrow, and then there's this gigantic percentage that usually gets paid out to the broker or the advisor. Um, my approach is a little more proactive, right? So I typically charge an hourly rate or a monthly retainer for a block of hours, and I try to walk alongside that CEO and give them great advice, right? So my walk is in line with theirs, and if we don't get a good offer, then it's like take a pass. And the ideal way to maximize your exit is to be able to put together a controlled auction if you're looking to do a third party sale. So just a methodical process, having all your financials in order, all the different reports that are going to want to be reviewed by the prospective buyers and due diligence, and be able to upload those into a deal vault, if you will, and give access to prospective qualified buyers. And then you have a bit of a bidding war, which is the absolute best way to maximize your exit.
Absolutely. And getting up to that point is not easy. It does require a lot of processes, a lot of planning that goes into place. You had said it could be anywhere from 3 years to 10 years, which doesn't, we're not talking about 30 days to 90 days before you decide to get to that decision, because it does take a lot to get up to that point. So in our industry, which is financial planning and wealth management, time is our greatest asset to help get my clients to the finish line, right? The more time we have to let markets do their thing, make some adjustments, figure out what their goals are. Life is not a straight line. So if we take a left, how do we course correct back to that point to be able to get them to that retirement or financial goals based finish line? And so for my process, I have a lot of steps involved that even gets them to my financial plan. Can you just high level your key steps when somebody walks into your office, they have time on their side, they say, hey, I'm interested in exit planning, and you say, okay, this is where we start, and this is the potential timeline that we're going to take to be able to get to the exit?
Yeah, Keith, to me, it all starts with asking the right questions and doing a lot more listening than talking, right? So every business owner has what's important to them. Some people are looking for the absolute maximum price that they can get. Other people are far more concerned about, hey, what happens to my employees? So they want to make sure that there's a good fit, and maybe even a private equity investor or a strategic. Well, strategic's not always in the best interest of the employees, because a lot of times there will be replication of duties and responsibilities, and part of the cost savings for the advantages of buying that business is that they can realize economies of scale and not have to employ all of the people. So a private equity investor or an internal sell is typically in the best interest of the employees to be able to retain their jobs and kind of proceed on as business as usual. So it's just that. It's like, what is your timeline? A lot of it's preparing them psychologically, because a lot of people, business owners, have started 40 years ago and they poured in 60 hours a week for the last 40 years. And the friends that they have are typically work in the business, and they don't have a whole lot of life outside of family and the job. So it's like, okay, you're not going to be showing up to work any longer. What are we going to do to make you feel worthy and accepted and powerful, or whatever the right adjectives are that are important to that individual? So just that process of start thinking about, hey, I need to start taking up some hobbies, whether it be golf or pickleball or skiing, hunting, fishing, whatever it might be, because they're going to have a lot more free time than they've had in the past. So that mental preparation of, well, what does the next chapter look like after I'm not doing the daily grind 6 days a week, 10 hours a day? That's a mindset change. So again, it's me asking questions to find out more about that individual and what they envision their future looking like, trying to mentally prepare them for that.
Sure. I mean, if you look at it, right, we know that for a business owner, 80% of their assets are tied up in their business. And that's beyond just the financials, but that's also the amount of sweat equity, the time that it took for them to get there. So a lot of that is their identity as well. Let's say let's maybe there's a lateral equivalent, that you have your financials and then maybe your personality, that your identity, that's also part of your business as well. So when you remove yourself from that, you're potentially removing yourself from a big part of your identity that was in your town or anything like that. So that's not a That's a big Band-Aid to rip off. And so it's important to address those concerns and then also make sure that they have an understanding of what their 2.0 looks like. And so I know that you had mentioned some exit strategies and how you'd mentioned, okay, so I might butcher it. You said strategic, there's auction. I mean, there's a ton of ways you can skin a cat, but how do you determine what is the right exit strategy for that business owner?
Yeah, based off of the responses to the questions that are asked, right? And a lot of times people, even with our free consultation, right, the initial visit, they'll have some type of thought in mind. So they may have one or two business active children that they want to be able to sell and or gift their business to. There might be people without children but have key employees that have shown lifelong dedication and commitment to the company that the owner wants to reward. And sometimes it's just like, look, I've busted my tail for all of my life to build this thing into a cash flow king, and I want to be able to maximize that. So then that's the traditional third party sell. And likely, if that gets involved, we'll bring in a M&A advisor if the deal is sizable and there's value over $10 million. But if it's more of a retail, smaller shop, then we will bring in a Main Street business broker to help us with that transaction. But typically, if it's internally or a family transaction, myself with the help of a business law attorney and usually their current CPA have enough knowledge to get that deal done.
Well, a lot of that sounds smooth, and we know that most of these sales that happen or transitions of ownership aren't very successful. Actually, the percentages weighs more on the likelihood of it not being a successful transaction. I think it's like 20 to 30% of business sales don't are really only end up being sales, and the rest and it becoming unsuccessful. What do you see as some of the biggest challenges business owners face when they're exiting their business?
Well, I think the number one most consistent challenge is the valuation that the business owner has in their mind is not typically in alignment with the value of the company, the market value. So just level setting realistic expectations is part of my job and giving them a feel for what the going rate is, whether it's 3 to 5 times EBITDA, or rarely there's industries that have some type of multiple of top line revenue, but I think that's more in years past, and some people are still hung up on that. So they feel like, okay, my company does 3 million in top line revenue. I deserve at least 1 to 2x top line. This day and age, everybody is a lot more concerned about the cash flow, right? The free cash flow that the company spins off and what the timeline for their return on investment. So a much more traditional valuation today is based off of multiple of EBITDA or free cash flow.
Right. And I think that's what's important. I had a CPA on here. We talked about exit planning as well. And he'd stated if your cash flow is not and your books are not done right, that can really affect your valuation. Have to
That's
be
usually step two, right? After you go over the goals and objectives, then we want to look at the financials, typically 3 to 5 years of P&Ls and balance sheet. And if they're done out of QuickBooks and they really can't explain them, and not that QuickBooks is a bad product, but if they're not being tied out by a CPA for tax purposes, or at least reviewed, if not audited by CPAs, then they're probably not going to be up to par for prospective buyers. So yeah, just cleaning up the financials, working collaboratively with the CPA from that client, or introducing them to a very capable one locally is a good second step in the process.
absolutely. And that leads me into my next question, which sounds like probably one of the answers you may say, If there's any others, then certainly feel free to add to that. What common mistakes do you see business owners making during the exit planning process, and how can they be avoided? So one would be making sure that your books are in order and that they've been reviewed by a quality CPA. And if you need to correct those and maybe stay on the business a little bit longer, figure out, you can obviously guide them with that. Are there any other common mistakes that you see that business owners make during that process?
Yeah, I think the number one mistake is procrastination, right? I mean, usually they're A-type personalities and very strong-willed and very competitive, and they're they're never, that bad thing is never going to happen to them, right? They're invincible is the word I was looking for. But unfortunately, statistics show that we are not invincible, not one of us. So I see on in a lot of instances that the business owner does not take the time and make the investment in putting together a plan, and typically that winds up in a closed business. So, yeah, procrastination on looking at the inevitable that at some point they're going to have to exit their business, and it's going to be much smoother if they have a bona fide written plan on what that looks like. Because I think you touched on it earlier. 80% of businesses that go up for sale never sell. And going back to the reason why is typically that business owner feels like it's worth more, so they hold out for that number that they never get, and then they either give away the company or walk away from it.
Now, I'm not plugging my own, well, I guess I am plugging my own
Yeah, you're
industry
welcome to.
of what I do. When you bring in wealth management early, right? It sounds like the key theme is planning and really figuring this out early as possible. So wealth management, we go in there, we figure out their wealth gap, right? They may have $15 million in assets and potential business valuation there. And to figure out their lifestyle post exit, they may need 23. So then the question is how do you fill up that wealth gap difference between the 15 and the 23 to be able to allow them to live all of those goals that you had interviewed them in the beginning? What do they want in their 2.0 life? And then that's where you can come in and say, hey, we need to create $8 million in value, and this is how we're going to get there, right? So we have time that we follow this, and this step, then our potential of you being able to live your best life, your best 2.0 life, is definitely going to enhance after we go through our process. So
Yeah,
I
that's
get
right.
that. Yeah. So
That's right. And well, a lot of times on that wealth gap that you're talking about, the business owner has convinced themselves that their company has enough value to fill that wealth gap to be able to retire comfortably. Well, typically when I bring in a rough valuation tool and we start crunching the numbers, that valuation is significantly less than what the business owner has in their mind. But if we reach them 3 to 10 years in advance of the actual exit, it's like, okay, great. I'm a certified value builder, right? So I can show them the 8 different value drivers on how do we get to that number that they're needing to retire comfortably. So that's why I asked for a few years in advance, so we have that runway that we need to get the right valuation. And I think we all try to time the market, and from being a wealth advisor that that's very difficult to do. None of us have that crystal ball, or we would already be retired and not still hustling. But just being prepared too, because sometimes you'll have roll-ups where you might have a national roofing company that wants to come to town and expand into the Kern County market. So they'll look at the most reputable companies in town and be wanting to make an offer quickly. But if that prospective seller is not prepared and their financials aren't tight, for lack of a better term, if they're not well kept and all of the requests from that prospective strategic buyer takes 3 weeks to 3 months to get that information, they're going to pass. They're going to go on to the next most reputable roofing company in town and start seeing if they're ready for sale. So it's never a bad idea to have your ducks in a row and just be prepared for that once in a lifetime opportunity where somebody's coming in willing to pay top dollar for your business.
Exactly. Exit planning is always just about the exit, right? It's just being
It's good
prepared.
strategy. I mean, it's kind of weird that that term in this town is a little bit taboo. I mean, I've had a couple clients say, "Oh, I don't want to write a check to planned exits because I don't want my bookkeeper to update her resume because she thinks we're selling it tomorrow." It's like, well, if you want me to talk to that person, I'm happy to explain that, exit planning is simply a good business practice and good business strategy. So we may not have plans to put the company up for sale for 10 years, but at some point, there's got to be a succession plan because people want to retire or the 5Ds happen for 100% of business owners exit, and it's better to exit with a plan.
Absolutely, absolutely. Can you share me? You've talked with a lot of business owners, and can you share maybe a high level success story where exit planning made a difference in with the business owner you'd work with?
So I do have a couple of deals that are mid-flight, but I'm under a mutual NDA, so not at liberty to talk about them. But I mean, I from personal experience, probably the best exit that I had was my first one when we sold ACN Communications to Arrival Communications. My three business partners and I met with an M&A advisory firm out of Newport Beach, signed a deal with them, and they marketed. They asked all the right questions, wanted to know what our goals and objectives were, and they found a really good cultural fit of a startup company that was new to the telecommunications field, and they wanted to buy an existing business with existing clients, and they wanted to keep all of the employees intact. So that was a really good fit, and that was back in 2000, 2001. I mean, that like every other exit, it came with its share of would have, should have, could have done things differently because the dot com bomb took place in about 2001 and some of their outside investing dried up. So some of the notes and stock that we took instead of cash at close, I probably would have done differently. And those are just things that I've learned from experience, right? If you go through enough deals, you see the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I have this thing that I like to refer to as costly wisdom. So a lot of times I can share with business owners what not to do, right, from personal experience.
Well, I think that goes back to what we had discussed in the beginning, right? Which is you can read the textbook. You can Google or YouTube anything you want probably nowadays about exit planning. But the best information is usually from wisdom, right? And whether there was a successful exit or one that had a negative outcome, either way, that's in your arsenal, and you can share those conversations with your clients to be able to guide them more towards the path that if they hear this or they see this or you have something attractive and you can dig into it a little deeper, and it might look great on the surface, but once you look under the hood, it could certainly backfire. There might be a huge taxable event if they decide to go that route. So I think
There's no substitute for an experience,
you don't have to
right?
have the designation to be able to be a good business value advisor, right? A lot of it
I
really,
agree with that, but at the same time, I'm humble enough to realize I don't know it all. And when I
absolutely.
get out of my sweet spot and we need a tax advisor, then we'll go and hire a tax planner because it's good to know what all those tax planning advantages are ahead of time before you structure the deal. I mean, like the worst case scenario is I get a call from a prospective client and they say, "Oh, hey, some guy walked in and I signed this letter of intent on the term." It's like, well, hold up. How much experience do you have in doing exits or mergers and acquisitions? It's well, none, but it sounded like too good to be true. And it's like, yeah, it probably is. So I highly recommend if a business owner doesn't um, contract with me that they at least find somebody that's been through several transactions that kind of help guide them through that process because it truly is much more complex and sophisticated than most people realize. It's much different than selling a house.
It
And I
really
think,
is. And you can't,
yeah,
and in this industry, you can't know everything. And you don't want to know. You want to get the best of the best to be a part of a team to assist your clients, right? So whether it is, one of the top CPAs out there, whether it is one of the best financial planners or estate planning attorneys or business attorneys, and then that should give that business owner a lot more peace of mind to know, hey, I have a well-rounded team here that's looking out in my best interest to be able to
that's
help me
right.
exit.
And one of the things that I offer too, Keith, is like after the sell, that there always needs to be a transition, right? Sometimes you have the advisors and the ink dries on the deal, and it's like, okay, best of luck, see ya. Part of my consultative services is the integration of the two teams, working on the culture and just kind of making a smooth transition without just walking away from the deal as soon as it's done. But and then people will ask me, well, what should I do? What investments do you recommend with this new wealth that I've just unlocked? Well, that's not my area of expertise. I refer them to Keith if he's the one that referred them to me in the first place, right? I mean, the financial planners have a skill set and training that I don't have. So it's nice to be a trusted advisor with a lot of answers, but at the same time, it's okay to say that is not my realm of expertise. So let's bring in a collaborative advisor to work on that.
Right, which is I got the designation and I spent a lot of time researching the process, but I know that being an exit advisor is a full-time job and doing what I do is a full-time job. So I guess you could have two full-time jobs, but I know that really let's have a specialist that can walk you through the entire process of exit planning. And when it's appropriate for me to step in to do what I feel I'm an expert in, then I will go there as well. But how do
Yeah, and I think it's
you?
I think it's great that you had that SEPA designation, by the way, Keith, just to have a basic knowledge of what that process looks like. So having gone through that rigorous exam and preparing for that, that is far more complex than average financial advisor would know about selling a business. So
Exactly.
props to you for investing the time and effort. And I think there's only like three of us SEPAs in all of Curtin County. 2/3 of us are on this podcast.
Well, let's talk about this, right? And you are new to the industry, and I think you certainly. And I'm fairly new to the industry. I think I'm over a year SEPA as well, but I'm a CFP too. But how do you see exit planning evolving over the next few years? We know that boomers are, they say in my industry, this is the greatest transition of wealth that we'll see than anything else within our lifetime. Boomers, big business owners, things like that as well. Um, how do you see the field of exit planning evolving over the next few years?
Yeah, I think the M&A industry is ripe for disruption, right? I think it's kind of a taboo topic. People, since I have planned exits as the name of my company on my business card, they don't necessarily want to meet with me in a restaurant or a bar or their office because I don't want people to become skittish. But um, I believe it's going to become a more wide open topic. I think people are wanting to become more educated on the subject. It doesn't need to be swept under the carpet as though it's a dirty little secret. It's again, 100% of business owners eventually exit. So if you're working for a company and there's gray hairs on the founder and CEO's head, you should be encouraging them to have a well thought out succession plan for the company so they can continue to retain those jobs and maybe even partake in some of the proceeds. I mean, one of the things we have not talked about is ESOPs, right? Or employee stock option plans. And those are sophisticated. And I don't pretend to be an expert, but as part of being a member of EPI and BEI, the two national organizations for exit planners, I just came back from a conference of exit planners in Denver, Colorado, Monday through Wednesday of this week. And I met a lot of really brilliant people and with all different types of expertise. So if I don't have the answer, I typically can point business owners in the direction of professionals that do.
Yeah, there's a lot involved. I mean, I do ESOPs as well. It's a big process, but for a business owner that's looking to transition their business to include some employee equity or anything like that. It's a great way to do it, but that's a whole nother podcast. But yeah, there are
Right.
ways. There's a hunt, like we said, there's 100 ways to skin a cat on the transition of that business. But I don't think we're going to be able to accomplish all of those goals today. And so, but I'm glad that you brought that up because that is an excellent planning tool. A lot of work, but definitely exit planning.
And I didn't realize you had some expertise in that arena. I'll have to buy you lunch and learn all that you
Yeah.
know about ESOPs.
Absolutely. I could always give you the high level one. So let's end it with this last question here. Business owner, and maybe it's just wrapping up everything that we've talked about today. Business owner, they hear this podcast, they're thinking about their eventual exit. What advice would you give that business owner when they think exit planning?
Well, running the risk of being a little sales pitchy, I would encourage them to go to plannedexits.com. There's a link to my Calendly there, and they can schedule a 30-minute free consultation, and I can learn a little bit about their business and what their goals and objectives are and see if I'm a good fit. And again, Keith, I'm a pretty good job having lived in Bakersfield all of my life, especially locally. I kind of know where all the experts are and some that are even outside of the area. And I can point that business owner in the right direction if I'm not the right solution for them. So I think that's a good step, is just to begin the dialogue. And again, if you're anywhere from 10 years out of leaving your business, and what a lot of people don't realize too, that I wanted to point out, Keith, is it's not like selling your house, right? There's not a wide open market for businesses. So that transaction period can often take 6 to 12 months. And then a lot of times they don't want to have all the expertise walk out the door as soon as the ink dries, right? They want the business owner to stay on for maybe a 12, 24, 36-month contract agreement as either employee or a consultant. So it's not a quick and fast process. It's often takes several years to ease out into the perfect retirement. So just don't procrastinate, take some action, talk to your financial advisor. Keith is a SEPA, or talk to me, and start the conversation about exit planning.
Absolutely. People ask me all the time, gosh, when is the best time to invest? Am I too late for investing? And I always tell them, right? I say, when was the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When is the second best time to plant a tree? Today, right? Which is just, even if you think you're late in the game or you're too early in the game, it's good to just get that conversation going and figure out if you're trending in the right direction. If you're not, sooner than later is the best idea, because it gives you opportunity to course correct some of those issues that you might have, right? So that's great. Well, Scott, I appreciate you jumping on the podcast today. You did mention your website. So if you could just one more time provide us with your website, provide us with any social media that you have, and for the audience, if they needed to get a hold of you on that deeper conversation about exit plan.
Yeah, plannedexits.com is my website. Garrison at plannedexits.com is my email address. Pretty active on LinkedIn, more so as an individual, Scott D. Garrison. And also on Facebook, I have a personal page, Scott Garrison, or a business page under Planned Exits, which is kind of new and doesn't have a lot of content yet, but I'm working on that. And Keith, thank you for the opportunity to talk, and hopefully I can do you a favor by taking some of your business owners and unlocking that wealth and putting it under your management and wise investments moving forward.
Absolutely, man. Take care. Thanks for the call. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
Appreciate you. Bye-bye.
Keith Galicia is a registered representative with and securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA SIPC. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, Consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision.
Scott Garrison is not affiliated with or endorsed by LPL Financial and Prime Portfolio Planning.